Yeah. Welcome back to the Bitfinex live stream. I'm your host, Ricardo Martinez. We're broadcasting live from the Plan B Forum in El Salvador, and I'm privileged to be with John Carvalho, CEO of Synonym. John, how are you?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So, John, recently when I caught up with you in Lugano, the big thing with Synonym was that you guys had just released PubKey. Would you mind informing us what PubKey is for those who don't know?
PubKey is basically our answer to fix the web, reboot the web, however you want to word it. The most simple aspect to describe within it that would be interesting to people is that we use the concept of a public key, sort of like like you use in Bitcoin, but it's not a Bitcoin key, but a public key as a domain name. And this allows you a whole bunch of other powers, because if you change the primitive from being a domain name that's permissioned, like from ICANN and a .com domain, etc., those are censorable. Those can be taken from you, replaced, etc. Whereas you hold the key, and so this domain name can't be taken from you, and it allows you to define where that domain name points to get your data, your tweets, well, not tweets, but your posts, files, links. Learn about how to pay you, and any type of information that might derive from your identity, you are now in control of where it points to. And so now we're building software to support that assumption, that underlying technology. So now you can have servers and things like this that you can either run yourself or trust other people to run. And even if they do censor you, you can now change your domain or your DNS records to point to a new server, whether you host it yourself or trust somebody different. And so PubKey is basically our answer to unlock the web. And we also within PubKey have an application that we're building. It's not just a protocol, as an interface to this new web that will allow you to do all of the features you would be able to do in the old web, whether it be search, buying things, e-commerce, social media, blogging, anything like this. It's going to support all of those formats, but within this kind of system that affords you a credible exit.
Okay. And will this new protocol and new internet be backwards compatible with existing sites that use SSL? And,
yes, it depends on which way you're looking at it. So these domain names, we do use HTTP and HTTPS. We're using web protocols, traditional web protocols, but we're not using traditional web domains.
Yeah.
So you can still do a lot of the
DNS. It's
well, there is. It's just not it's not that DNS.
Okay.
And so you can interoperate within an application that supports both. If it supports legacy DNS and what we call PK DNS or PubKey DNS, then you can access both webs. But they are actually separate. So it's just a matter of interoperability, is how interoperable can you make it feel to the user within the application.
Yeah.
And so we do plan.
It's not like an incrossable barrier to do that.
It's not incrossable, but there are aspects that are not compatible. Like the old web doesn't understand keys.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be able to use Google to find things in PubKey.
Yeah,
but you might be able to use PubKey to find things in Google.
Okay, that makes sense. And how does all of Synonym's suite of products fit together with this new internet? How do you envision all these moving parts working together?
So the overall mission that we have at Synonym is something that we call the atomic economy, and that's what we're trying to build. And the atomic economy is sort of like a civic engineering project to try to have an actual model of an ecosystem of protocols and software that allow people to actually have a totally separate digital economy that they can opt into if they want to opt out of the legacy economy.
Yeah.
And so that would include support and assumptions for things like Bitcoin, Lightning Network, PubKey, etc. So this way you can have everything that we tell people that Bitcoin will disrupt: big banks, big tech, big states. All of those things, if we actually disrupt them, we have to replace whatever utility they actually provide, the minimum utility they actually provide, with something different. And we don't usually talk about that. What will the world look like when Bitcoin wins? That's what we're trying to show, is one example of how we think the world could look if Bitcoin wins, if peer-to-peer web technology wins, if key-based identity wins. Then this is a way that you can actually have the same use cases and the same systems in place that big tech, big banks, and big state provide, but provided by the people for the people.
Yeah, like an open permissionless system. How similar does this work to things like the IPFS or Nostr or these kind of like decentralized like networks and storage. Like for instance, if I have a domain website that's like a key, where do I store like the pictures I put on my website and that kind of thing?
Couple different questions there.
Yeah.
So how does it compare to other projects that are either researching or delivering web protocols or new networking protocols that may or may not also be key based?
Yeah.
There are similarities. It's maybe easier to talk about the differences, and I'll focus on Nostr since I think your listeners will probably be more familiar with that.
Yeah, I think most people will be familiar with Nostr.
So Nostr is also key-based, but they don't have the domain name concept. They don't have any sort of sticky identity concept, which means that they don't have credible exit, like I mentioned earlier. The concept of credible exit is simply that no matter who you trust, you can remove yourself from that situation without any sort of major disruption or no disruption at all, ideally. Yeah. And so we try to aim for no disruption at all. Whereas in Nostr, you are putting your private key into every application that you use, so it's less secure in that way. Whereas with PubKey, you keep your keys separate from the application, and you use what's like an authenticated session, which you can revoke if you want to.
Okay.
And so we've actually taken the time to address how people can manage a self-sovereign identity, whereas they just did it raw and said just use a key and whatever happens, happens. If you lose the key, you're going to have to find some way to tell people your new key. If you change servers or change relays, you're going to have to find some way to tell people that you're on your own. And then they provide basically centralized solutions to that, but they haven't provided a decentralized solution. And that's really a big core difference. We also don't sign all data like Nostr does because you don't need to anymore, because the signing is inherent through the DNS. And you want the flexibility of using both a trusted server and a self-hosted server if you want to. Yeah. And if you sign all the data, then you don't have that same flexibility. There's also some trade-offs with signing all the data, because if you sign the data and your key becomes stolen, now you have some issues like clarifying which messages were from when it wasn't stolen and when it was. And now you have to sign messages from a new key. And so there's a lot of kind of lock-in that happens with your old key. Yeah. And we avoid that situation with our design.
I think with like PGP, Nostr, Bitcoin, like all these technologies which leverage encryption, like key management has always been like a real tough nut to crack. Like, what is the solution that you guys have devised for key management?
So, two things. We'll eventually allow key management and key signing, I guess you would say, authentication, etc. Yeah. We'll eventually add those into the BitKit wallet app that we have, which is our mobile Bitcoin and Lightning wallet app. But we also made a dedicated application called PubKey Ring. And this PubKey Ring is just only for holding identity keys and for managing those sessions that I mentioned if you want to revoke them. And we'll keep adding features so you can customize your DNS, things like this. So it's a dedicated app for holding keys. It's a very simple app, very easy to use, but it allows you to separate, where you put your keys from which applications you use, so you can use them more safely.
Okay, and will you have like the ability to compartmentalize like your online digital life? Like, say, like like I have like my email for work and then like my personal email or whatever. Like, will you be able to like have like a key, like a public key, I guess, for like one identity, like
you could.
Another one for. I
think what I find is that people tend to prefer having fewer identities, other than people that like specifically want to like troll anonymously in this kind of thing. Like people who have a slightly nefarious intent tend to want many identities. Yeah. But all people need more than one when it comes to the internet. You already have many because you're making a separate account in every website you use, and to them those are kind of separate identities on some level. So yeah, I think that. Sorry, what was the original question?
Like if you could compartmentalize your identity.
Oh, so you can make as many identities as you want, right? Yeah. Just like with Bitcoin, you can make as many public keys as you want. Yeah. You can make as many public keys in PubKey as well. The difference is now you have to find or host, for all those identities. Okay. So you have to manage them. Whether or not you are, want to manage them is up to you. But you probably will. You probably want, like for example, even legitimate uses or morally legitimate uses, like I have a Twitter account for PubKey. Yeah. I have a Twitter account for Synonym. I have a Twitter account for me. Yeah. Those are multiple accounts, right? Yeah. You can't do that in Nostr because you can't delegate accounts. You can with PubKey.
Okay, cool. And like, I guess with this idea of the atomic economy, like, how do you envision this working? Like, people will have BitKit, that's like their gateway to this parallel internet, and then like people are just going to move everything into like Lightning, like Bitcoin-based economy? Like how do you, or maybe eCash? Like,
So maybe there's more than one question in there. I'll say bootstrapping is hard.
Yeah.
And as far as like how do you bootstrap, that we could talk all day about that.
Yeah, yeah,
It is difficult. You have concepts like network effect, things like this, competition of protocols, etc. So it's difficult to say how we'll actually do it, other than marketing,
Yeah.
or just sheer utility.
Yeah.
And we do try to
like if something's just light
we try
years
to
better.
we try to pay special attention to user experience.
Yeah.
You may have noticed if you use the BitKit wallet that it's a different experience than if
Yeah,
you
it
use a
certainly
traditional
is.
Bitcoin wallet.
Yeah.
And we do the same thing with PubKey app. So we do try to make it easier for people to embrace this, but we also are trying to show them that we're giving them new powers they didn't have before. Within the PubKey app, we have this concept of a social semantic graph, which is sort of an upgraded concept to maybe the web of trust you've heard of before.
Yeah.
And it's just a way for people to have semantic tags, social tagging we call it, where they can tag any type of data, any type of key, any type of endpoint, any type of URL with some sort of semantic tag in order to help curate it publicly so people can sort through it. And this is something you can't do with other platforms, something you can't do on Twitter, something you can't do in Nostr. And so we're trying to show people, because we have this setup, we can safely provide indexing for a social graph that you can use in a very relative way. As far as how we transition people wholly to the atomic economy, well, I think that probably what's required is some pain. People will see, oh, I actually need an alternative. Are there any alternatives? And then they may find it. As far as like things like Bitcoin and Lightning, well, we're big on providing protocols that are agnostic to other protocols. This is getting a little bit abstract, but we have other projects that we are working on, like, for example, PayKit, which is a way of taking multiple payment protocols and abstracting them under one payment protocol. And so this way, we can address the fact that there are always going to be more payment protocols, and there are always going to be people that use different sets of them. But this system allows people to match them automatically in the background. So we are trying to make it easy for people to transition and to pay in whatever ways they're comfortable with. So if for some reason somebody wants to make a wallet that supports PubKey, but it's for Ethereum and Tether and all these other things, they can do so, but still be part of the atomic economy. So we employ this concept that we call mutual consensus, which is a little bit redundant, but it's just that we try to recognize that markets are rules. That it's just a set of rules that people agree on, but people don't agree on all rules. But that just means we have many markets. It doesn't mean we need one. It means that we just need to figure out where people agree and match them when they do agree.
That's wild, man. So, like, with this protocol, are there any scalability challenges? Or
Yes and no. I mean, the more peer-to-peer you want to be, the more difficulty you're going to have with scaling, because it's like the Bitcoin problem where everybody has to keep a whole copy of the blockchain, right? If you actually want to verify and safely use Bitcoin, you have to have an entire copy of the whole database of Bitcoin. Well, in the web, that's not practical. You're not going to keep a whole copy of the internet on your home computer, on your phone, even on a nice beefy server. You can't do it. So you have to have some degree of centralization when you're talking about the web. There's also a lot of utility to centralization, because there's always many use cases that benefit from having many people on the same computer in the same place. And so we try to make it so PubKey allows for both. If you want to behave in a peer-to-peer way, you can, if that's what's optimal. If you want direct privacy, direct trust, this kind of thing. But if you want to use a centralized use case, you can safely do that as well.
Okay. Well, I mean, with things like the Fediverse, for instance, like where people host their own Mastodon, or like we've seen things like Umbrel and Start9 where people are like hosting their own node and their own Nextcloud and stuff like that. Do you envision like people using this parallel network as like a self-hosted thing, or like you guys are also an LSP, you provide Lightning services, so like are you seeing it more like from that aspect of a Lightning service provider, and there will be others that are also
all I really care about is that they hold the keys, because in the end the user decides how much they value whatever those keys represent. Some people make throwaway Twitter accounts, some people make throwaway Medium accounts and all kinds of they don't even remember their password, and then sometimes they can't even retrieve it and they just make a new one. So you have to allow for a spectrum of use cases. Some people are extremely privacy conscious and they want to have a separate key for every single thing that they do, and they want to manage them, and they want to have a separate wallet for everything they do and separate those. We will allow for all of those use cases, but again, like if you want scalability, you're going to need to make some compromises.
And I think like the convenience factor is huge, because like even with Bitcoiners, like a lot of people don't want to run their own node.
Yeah.
Like it's just too much work for them, and they just.
Well, the incentive is tricky. Like,
Yeah.
if you're not actually a merchant worried whether or not somebody's sending you real Bitcoin
Yeah.
or they're on the same chain as you, then you have less of a concern. You know, sometimes you just feel safe enough just holding your keys.
Yeah.
And again, that's that spectrum again, right? Like some people are okay with this amount of risk, and some people are okay with that amount of risk.
Yeah, no, that makes sense for sure. What can we expect from Synonym in 2025?
A lot. This is kind of our biggest planned year. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to start the private beta for the PubKey app.
Nice.
And the background, the BitKit team is rewriting the entire BitKit application in basically what we call native. So this way it will be much more efficient, and it will allow us to provide some features and user experiences that we couldn't before. And so increasing performance, increasing features. By the middle of the year, we'll have PayKit integrated with BitKit as well.
Okay.
And then by the end of the year, we're going to be integrating all of the products together, where you'll have PubKey features within BitKit, and you'll have monetization features within PubKey app. So we'll introduce basically peer-to-peer e-commerce within this kind of interoperable system. And there's more that I won't bore you with. We have some really skunkworks kind of speculative projects. Like, we're going to do a proof of concept for a peer-to-peer mutual credit system, which is basically our answer for the low level of money in commerce where it's trusted. We're just saying we have a really cool idea for how we think we can just solve that aspect of money without blockchains, without trust, without centralization, I should say, but digitizing trust through using the social graph, routing through the social graph. And I'm really excited about that, but it's totally speculative. I don't know if it will go anywhere, but we're going to build a proof of concept for that as well.
Nice. Since you're working on a decentralized internet, what do you think about these first forays that we've seen from social media companies with Threads or Blue Sky or even Mastodon, this decentralized Nostr, I would include in that, this decentralized kind of social media internet direction that things are moving in?
I would say the only one of those that has a potential for long-time viability is Blue Sky, unless Nostr changes. If Nostr could adopt PubKey. I consider PubKey to if for Nostr people, I try to say, imagine if I went into the NIP processes, which is the Nostr improvement proposals. If I went in there and I just wrote all the proposals that I thought would make Nostr perfect, it would be PubKey. You know what I mean? And that's why we're making it. I'm not going to try to convince all those people to do what we think is best. We'll just show them and proceed that way. What was the other part of your question?
Oh, what do you think of this whole future that's moving towards decentralized internet?
Oh, I guess I was mentioning Blue Sky as being the most viable of those because they have the most similarities to our design.
Okay.
My concern with Blue Sky is they have a real cultural problem. The people, I don't know if the people that make it, but I think so, but definitely the people that use it are extremely politically oriented.
Yeah.
And so they're basically trying to be the anti-truth social. They're trying to say we're the left, we're the progressives, anything that is more on the emotional side of politics, they're trying to make that the place where you feel safe. And so they're focused on moderation, all of the things that are not what you would think are the important things with censorship resistance and decentralization. Those are their priorities. That could end up corrupting their designs over time because their designs are pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
But when you have those incentives, you lose incentives to prioritize censorship resistance and things like this because you're spending all your time figuring out how to be good at it.
When you have a platform that's censorship resistant, though, back to the topic of trolling, trolls do ruin people's online experiences. So there's a fine line, I think, between content moderation and then decentralization and censorship resistance and freedom. These platforms like Blue Sky or Threads or whatever, they want to be able to censor, but it's a decentralized network, so it kind of conflicts, right? So where do you stand on that? Do you want to let the user curate their own experience and put that in their hands?
I mean, I think decentralization requires responsibility, personal responsibility. Any amount that you are not personally responsible, you are trusting somebody else to do it for you.
Yeah.
So when it comes to stuff that you find objectionable, you should be the one defining what's objectionable, but you should have the tools to filter it out.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to something like trolling, you should choose whether to opt out or in yourself to certain types of posts.
Yeah.
And you should have some way of identifying whether those posts are the kinds you want to see, whether you want to even see posts or replies from people that you don't follow or people that aren't in your web of trust and an extended network.
Yeah.
We see it as the PubKey web is the entire graph of data.
Yeah.
And when people are searching, they're searching, they're filtering it down to one view of the graph.
Yeah,
They're saying,
like where their
I want to
interest
stand
lies.
here and I want to look at just this data from this perspective.
Yeah.
And that's what we the tools we try to provide. Because you still have to support centralized use cases, and which means now you have to follow laws, which means you have to follow regulations related to data, which includes not serving illegal data. And so you have to check the data that's being put on your server anyway.
Yeah, that's
so anybody that's having a multi-party server with more than themselves on it is going to have to be looking at what the data people are using because they're hosting that data and serving it.
Yeah.
So we have to include moderation features, but what we're going to do is we're going to say, yes, we will automatically deal with any of the illegal things, but any of the subjectively objective things, we're just going to tag them for people and let them decide if they want to opt out of certain tags. So if you don't want to see nudity, anything that's tagged as nudity by your web of trust or by our moderation system, you won't see it. If you choose to opt out of seeing, I don't know, racist comments, anybody that marks something as racist that you trust, it'll filter out those posts.
Yeah.
So it's more putting the user in control of the algorithm, the user and the people they trust, than trying to pretend that we could ever infer exactly what users want.
And last question, because we've been going on for a minute here, but do you guys even have an algorithm, or is it like the Fediverse or like Nostr or something where there's not really an algorithm and it's just kind of like whatever?
Currently,
gets
no,
posted?
but all of those, all of the platforms, including Nostr and Blue Sky, do have that capability, and we will have that capability. So we have an indexer, and that indexer would be part of that capability. We could take the data in that indexer and we could apply our own biases to it and create a feed of that and say this is the For You feed, or this is the Bitcoin For You feed. Like we can curate it however we want to and provide that as a feed, as an option to users. But for now, we're trying to focus on making sure they can understand that they can do it themselves. And then later, if we observe that there aren't enough people that are interested in creating it themselves and that they would highly benefit from a centralized, trusted one, then we'll create a marketplace of indexes and feeds that people can choose from.
Okay.
And this is something that Blue Sky is already doing and that Nostr has just begun doing as well.
Okay.
But they're both lacking the social tagging and semantic graph aspect.
Yeah, which is a whole new protocol that you guys have created.
I don't know if protocol is the correct term, but maybe, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, John, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and
you for
telling
having
us
me.
all about Synonym. Is there anything you want to say before we cut it off?
No, just give our products a chance. You can visit our website at synonym.to. You can check out our wallet at bitkit.to. It's on App Store and the Play Store as well. And then for PubKey, you can check out pubkey.app if you're interested in a preview of the application, or pubkey.org if you want to research building with our protocols.
Okay, amazing. Well, thanks again, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.